네, 안녕하세요. 승승장구 이프로입니다. 오늘은 우리 비트코인에 대해서 이야기를 좀 해볼 텐데요. 이제 마이크로 스트래터지의 회장이자 비트코인 전략의 대표 주자인 마이클 세일러의 최근 인터뷰에서 밝힌 비트코인을 중심으로 한 자산 전략, 비트코인의 현재 위치와 미래에 대해서 이야기해 보도록 하겠습니다. 해당 부분 내용인지라 의역과 오역 있으면 안 되어서 제가 영상을 제작하는데 정말 오랜 시간이 걸렸는데요. 고생을 했다고 구독과 좋아요, 알람 설정 한 번씩 눌러주시고요. 다른 건 몰라도 좋아요는 꼭 한 번씩 눌러주세요. 여러분들의 좋아요가 제가 영상을 제작하는데 큰 힘이자 응원이 됩니다. 그럼 영상 바로 시청해 보시겠습니다.
Are you surprised the U.S. hasn't yet bought Bitcoin?
I'm not surprised. I was surprised that the U.S. has embraced Bitcoin as radically as it has over the last 6 months. I think I didn't expect nearly all the cabinet members to be so enthusiastic, or the Secretary of the Treasury. I didn't expect the strategic Bitcoin reserve, to be put in place so quickly. I didn't expect the crypto czar to declare that Bitcoin is, the one, global digital commodity in the world and is digital gold. I didn't expect the President of the United States to say never sell your Bitcoin. So those I didn't expect. I generally expect that large governments will move in a plodding, somewhat methodic, not always rational fashion, because there are just so many interests involved. And so my expectations are moderated in that regard. I think most of the aggressive action will come from small, mid-sized businesses, because they have the most to gain, the least to lose, and they can move the quickest.
But when the rhetoric has changed from the White House and we have the strategic Bitcoin reserve and all these tailwinds, you're buying pretty much every Monday. Why is the price at 150 or 200K?
I think we're going through a rotation right now where, lots of non-economically interested parties are rotating out of the asset, and then a new cohort of investors are entering. A lot of Bitcoin was, for whatever reason, left in the hands of governments, in the hands of lawyers, in the hands of bankruptcy trustees, like the FTX bankruptcy, and they kind of had to hold it for a year or 2 years as they're working through their process. And then when they saw this massive market rally, I think a lot of those trustees, they don't have a 10-year investor's mindset. They just thought, well, this is a good exit point to get liquidity. So I think people less committed to the long term have been taking this opportunity to exit the market. And I think a whole new class of investors are entering by way of the ETFs and by way of the Bitcoin treasury companies.
One of the things I enjoy most about talking to you or listening to you is the whole market could be in total panic, fear, anxiety about maybe the macro factors. And you always have this sense of calm about you that things will get resolved. So you're clearly not worried about things that are happening. We'll eventually resolve these global tensions, the tariffs, and it'll be smooth sailing for Bitcoin eventually. That's the read I get.
Every single crisis recruits a new class of Bitcoin believers. There's just a delay in between the crisis and the Bitcoin rally. So, for example, in March, Bitcoin crashed with everything else down to like 4,000 or 4,500, and I started buying it in the 9,000s or the 10,000s. And I remember when Bitcoin was 10,000 and the Nasdaq was like 12,000, and then Bitcoin would rally up and rage, and then there would be a crypto crash and it came down, and on the other hand, here we are today, Bitcoin's like 96 or 97,000, the Nasdaq 17,000. And now we're in a big tariff crisis, and the near-term reaction is always the market cramps and everybody sells everything. But the long-term reaction is, you know, if I had all my money invested in Bitcoin instead of invested in that company, I wouldn't have been affected by tariffs. And so what you have is a reallocation of portfolios to being more Bitcoin, less the other thing. If people are thinking now, if I had more Bitcoin, less gold, I would have made a lot more money in the last 4 years. If I had more Bitcoin, less big tech, I would have made a lot more money. If I had more Bitcoin and less that bond instrument, I would have done better. So these are teaching moments, right? And in any macro panic, the most liquid, leverageable asset is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the only thing that you can sell. You can sell it short with 50x leverage on Saturday morning. It's the only thing that you can short 50x on Saturday morning. So when people panic on a weekend or an evening, it's going to be volatile. And if someone wants to sell some financial asset because of some gloom and doom thing that's happened, they're going to go to Bitcoin first because it's the only thing they can trade. And then not just trade in the US, trade globally, worldwide. And so it is volatile because it is useful, and it will be in times of panic and contraction. It will correlate for a short moment with other assets, but then it will bounce back and it will break. It'll break that correlation, decouple, and it'll rally higher. And that has happened, consistently for the past 15 years. And it's happening right now as we watch it. So I'm calm in these times because I think we're going to win over a new set of Bitcoin believers, and a new set of people that thought they had the perfect business are going to realize that no investment in real estate and private equity and public equity or in a currency derivative is a risk-free investment. And when we say, look, Bitcoin is not a currency derivative, it is not a company, it is not real estate, it doesn't have a supply chain, it has no employees, it has no nexus, it is not, subject to that counterparty risk. Now there'll be a new class of investors that will understand what it means to be exposed to those risks, and they'll be like, oh, you mean like no tariffs on Bitcoin? Yeah, no tariffs on Bitcoin.
It's so wise. And I think people realizing that it is decoupling from everything. It is such a unique asset that shines on its own. Well, thank you so much, Michael. The best place to wrap up, I think, is just again spotlighting how well MicroStrategy has performed on the Bitcoin standard. When you put up those charts of just how it's outperformed the Magnificent Seven, gold, bonds, everything by far. It's crazy to me when I see mainstream media still not understanding how powerful this could be for a corporation and not jumping on board and realizing how revolutionary and how visionary you are. When do you think mainstream media will come behind companies like yours that are doing something so innovative that's clearly working?
It's an exponential process. When I was at MIT, I studied complex exponential systems. And they started with an illustration where they say, well, you have a pond and there are lily pads in the pond, and it takes 30 days for the lily pads to spread across the pond, but they're doubling every day. On what day of the month will you notice you have any lily pads? It's a quick test of exponential math, but you realize the first 3 weeks of the month you don't see any lily pads in the pond, right? And then you notice a little bit. And then in 3 days of the month, everything happens. And so I think what's happening here is there's a exponential phenomena. Who understands the value of our business? Our investors. Our investors understand, right? And you met some of them at this conference. And so the reason we announced we're going to double our capital raising program, and the reason the stock trades up when we announce we're going to issue $21 billion of equity is because the investors understand. They're on the journey with us, and we keep recruiting new investors. And I think there was some stat that I heard from an investment bank. They said last year your company was like 16% of all the equity raised in the stock market or something. So, we're not half, but the point is one company out of 5,000 companies that is raising, 16% of the capital on the market suggests that there are a lot of equity investors that are discovering what we're doing. And, what I've said about Bitcoin, right? The secret of Bitcoin and the simple, elegant truth and the reason that it's spreading virally everywhere on earth and the reason it'll keep spreading. So a lot of smart people in the world, they just want to keep their money. That's the secret, right? People buy Bitcoin because they want to keep their money. People are starting to buy Bitcoin treasury companies like Strategy because we've constructed a very elegant, powerful business model based upon digital capital that strips away all of the dozen risks that are plaguing every other well-run company in the world right now. And so investors are smart. They think, well, how do I get a return and avoid the risk and what's working? And, more and more are discovering our company every day.
You've pioneered the corporate playbook and you're giving it away. I know so many people are grateful. Any final thoughts?
Just happy to be on the journey with you.
Well, thank you so much as always, Michael. It's just a pleasure to be here. And I know so many people look up to you. It's always wonderful to see you with a new presentation that gives us something to think about. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. If you can, turn on those notifications and leave us a positive review. They really help the show grow organically.
네, 앞선 영상 시청 잘 해보셨을까요? 이제 비트코인과 전체 암호화폐 시장에 대한 많은 이야기가 오고 갔었는데요. 오늘 영상 요약 도와드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 이제 마이클 세일러가 놀랐다고 밝힌 거는 단순히 미국 정부가 아직 비트코인을 매입하지 않았다는 사실이 아니었습니다. 이제 그보다는 지난 6개월 동안 백악관과 일부 정부 부처가 비트코인을 급진적으로 받아들인 태도 변화가 더 놀라웠다고 말했는데요. 거기다가 미국의 트럼프 대통령은 비트코인을 절대 팔지 말라라는 발언까지 했습니다. 미국 규제 당국은 공식적으로 비트코인을 유일한 디지털 상품으로 규정을 했고요. 이러한 인식 전환은 정부 차원에서 비트코인을 제도권 자산으로 받아들이기 시작했다는 신호로 해석을 할 수가 있겠습니다. 그렇다면 비트코인 가격은 왜 더 오르지 않고 있을까요? 여기에 대해서 세일러는 이렇게 말합니다. 지금 시장은 회전 국면에 있다. 과거에 비트코인을 보유하고 있던 파산 기업이나 정부 기관들이 자산을 정리를 하면서 매물이 시장에 나오고 있고, 그 반면에 ETF, 기업 트레저리, 장기 투자자들이 그 자리를 천천히 채워가고 있다라는 겁니다. 즉, 단기적 가격 정체는 투자자 교체 과정의 일환이라는 것이죠. 그렇다면 왜 세일러는 이제 관세 전쟁, 무역 전쟁 등 이런 위기 속에서도 항상 차분할까요? 그의 철학은 명확합니다. 모든 글로벌 위기는 결국 새로운 비트코인 신봉자를 만들어낸다. 위기, 반성, 그리고 포트폴리오 재조정, 그리고 비트코인 투자, 이 흐름은 과거에도 반복이 됐고 앞으로도 반복될 것이다. 예를 들어서 예전에도 2020년 코로나 위기 이후 비트코인의 급반등은 우리는 이미 목격한 바 있죠. 많은 이들은 비트코인의 유동성과 변동성을 우려합니다. 하지만 세일러는 오히려 시장 유연성의 증거로 이것을 보는데요. 비트코인은 24시간 365일 거래 가능한 유일한 글로벌 자산입니다. 위기 시 가장 먼저 매도가 되기는 하지만은 공포가 지나고 나면 또 가장 먼저 반등을 하는 자산이란 거죠. 즉, 단기적 패닉 속에서도 장기적으로는 시장이 항상 비트코인으로 되돌아온다라는 겁니다. 그리고 마이크로 스트래터지의 전략입니다. 2024년 작년 한 해 동안 전체 시장 자본 조달 중 무려 16%가 마이크로 스트래터지의 주식이 차지를 했습니다. 이건 단순히 숫자의 문제가 아니죠. 시장 참여자들이 비트코인 중심 전략을 인식을 하고 신뢰를 하고 있다라는 증거입니다. 마이크로 스트래테지는 비트코인 트레저리 기업 모델을 통해 다음과 같은 전통적인 리스크를 제거를 합니다. 공급망 리스크, 인플레이션, 금리 변동, 지정학적 문제, 노동 문제, 관세 문제 등등이요. 이처럼 디지털 자산을 기반으로 재무 구조를 단순화하고 본질에 집중하는 전략은 기존 기업들과는 완전히 다른 방향성을 보여줍니다. 그런데 왜 아직도 주류 언론이 주목하지 않는가? 이 부분도 세일러는 지수 함수적 확산이라는 개념으로 설명을 합니다. 이제 MIT에 있던 시절 통해서 비유를 했었는데 이제 연못에 수련잎이 자라는데 매일 이게 2배씩 커진다라고 하면은 30일째 이 수련잎이 연못을 모두 덮는다라고 하죠. 그런데 대부분의 사람들은 27일, 28일째가 되어서야 그 변화가 급격하다라고 느낀다라는 겁니다. 즉 마지막 순간에 폭발적으로 확산이 될 것이라는 것이죠. 이제 비트코인도 마찬가지입니다. 이미 투자층은 꾸준히 확장되고 있지만 주류 언론이나 대중은 아직 폭발 직전의 정적 상태로 인식하고 있다라는 것이죠. 이제 마지막으로 마이클 세일러는 이렇게 말합니다. 세상에는 돈을 지키고 싶어하는 똑똑한 사람들이 많고 그래서 그들은 결국 뭐를 택한다? 비트코인을 택한다. 그리고 마이크로 스트래티지는 이 흐름에 맞춰서 강력하고 우아하며 리스크를 제거한 디지털 자산 중심 기업 모델을 구축해 나가고 있습니다. 이것이 바로 비트코인이 단순한 투자 수단이 아니라 새로운 시대의 자본, 전략이 되어가고 있다라는 증거이죠. 네, 오늘 제가 준비한 영상은 여기까지였고요. 영상 보시고 나서 여러분들의 의견 정말 궁금한데요. 댓글로 남겨주시면 너무 감사하겠고요. 여러분들의 댓글이 제 채널이 성장하는 데 큰 도움이 됩니다. 번거로우시더라도 꼭 한 번씩 작성 부탁드리고요. 이제 오늘 영상은 3부 영상으로 제가 찾아뵈었는데 앞선 1, 2부 영상 같은 경우에는 제가 더보기란에 링크 달아놨으니까요. 못 보신 분들 같은 경우에는 해당 영상들도 시청해 보시기 바랍니다. 그럼 저는 다음 영상으로 찾아뵐 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 긴 시간 시청 너무 고생 많으셨습니다. 감사합니다.